There can be no more serious task than we have for Indian children than ensuring the quality of their education. The Johnson O'Malley program, which was authorized really as early as 1934, is to provide contracts operating under educational plans as approved by BIE to address academic and cultural needs of eligible American Indian and Alaska Native students. JOM awards supplemental assistance to tribal organizations, school districts, and other partner organizations to address the unique cultural and academic needs of Native students in our public schools, where more than 90% of Native students attend. The last count was in 1995. It identified 271, almost 272,000 eligible Native American students. However, according to the Census Bureau, there actually is almost 800,000 today, looking at the census in 2010. Congress has raised concerns about this persistent inaccuracy of eligible student counts and has directed the BIE in coordination with Department of Education and in consultation with tribes to update the student count. However, the BIE has only provided several incomplete, inaccurate, and subsequently unofficial eligible counts, student counts, including one as recently as 2012 or 14. I think we can all agree that this is a critical program for improving the quality of Native American children's lives. It has been ignored far too long. I want to applaud my co-sponsors, Senator Langford and Senator Daines, for working with me. I want to again thank the chairman, Senator Hoeven, and the ranking member, or the vice chairman, excuse me, Senator Udall, for all the great work in trying to collaborate. Let's get this done. 1994. Hello. It is time to actually get an accurate count, and once we get that accurate count, we'll have the ability to decide where we should appropriately assign and allocate resources. So thank you, Mr. Chairman, for putting this on the mark, and I look forward to working with my co-sponsors to secure passage in the Senate and then work with our counterparts over in the House of Representations to make this public law. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If I can just take a minute to talk about an issue that we had a hearing on last week. Mr. Chairman, I appreciate your response to the letter that I and other members of this committee sent on human trafficking, and I'm glad to hear that National Indian Gaming Commission is doing its job to educate and provide resources to combat human trafficking. You mentioned in your testimony that your organization isn't aware of any data that suggests human trafficking is more rampant in Indian gaming than other similar industries. How do you think we can collect the data so that we can be better informed, and don't you think it would be valuable to have that information?
Thank you, Senator. Absolutely, and we stand ready to work with any partners to collect data as broadly as possible. As I mentioned in my oral testimony, our regulation philosophy is one of proactive regulation. So while we absolutely support the gathering of data that will help target effective regulatory action, I don't think an agency needs to wait for the data to come in to recognize that there are opportunities to help stamp out human trafficking as they exist. In this regard, I really have to thank our Vice Chair, Catherine Isom-Claus, who within the agency has taken a leadership position to get each and every one of us on board to work with federal partners, tribal partners, industry partners to do whatever we can. But data, it starts with data. We're here to work with data collection agencies that have better tools than we do as regulators, but that doesn't mean we can't start doing what we can now. And we're doing it through our trainings. We're doing it with through our participation with the Tribal Gaming Protection Network. We have National Indian Gaming Association here, American Gaming Associations involved with that. We're active, but more data is absolutely needed.
And I think if we know that events and hospitality industry is particularly a target for this kind of behavior and criminal activity, and we want to make sure that all of the people involved in your industry, whether it is the hotel that's attached or whether it is, in fact, people on the floor watching what's going on, are well-trained and can recognize the signs of human trafficking, especially when it involves small children. Secretary, as we talk about combating drug and human trafficking and domestic violence in the context of gaming, I think it's extremely important that law enforcement has enough resources to effectively respond to these cases. All across our region, we're seeing more and more law enforcement jails, more and more detention centers being shut down by order of various federal agencies, and that creates a real void in Indian country in terms of access to resources, especially as it requires cooperation given jurisdictional challenges and the customers of gaming associations. What are you doing to build a more momentum for additional law enforcement resources, both in terms of personnel and in terms of jail capacity?
Good question, Senator. I thought you were going to ask me something about gaming there.
I think this is about gaming. I think that when we're looking at the additional challenges that gaming brings to Indian country, and that certainly is, if you take an isolated reservation in North Dakota, you aren't going to see a lot of people who the tribal court wouldn't have jurisdiction over. But once you have gambling, that hopefully is bringing more people who are going to enjoy the hospitality, but it challenges. And so, you know, there's two sides of this. And so I just have to tell you, I think that these are issues that are associated and could, in fact, be exacerbated by Indian gaming and by casino gambling on Indian country.
Well, thank you, Senator. So let me do my best to answer your question and ask that you bear with me. I am still pretty new in the job and trying to get a handle on everything that we're doing. I still receive briefings nearly every day from our various offices and bureaus. I do know that some of our staff came before you last week to talk about the human trafficking issue, and based on that, you probably have as good or better information than I do on that. But I do know that they are actively engaged both with sort of the industry side, with the tribal casino folks, and with tribal law enforcement to try to get training for them to identify both the related drug trafficking and the human trafficking issues, and to help them learn to identify situations when these may arise, whether it's in a tribal gaming facility or a tribal hospitality or any other location like a truck stop. I know that's and also a big source of concern. So we're actively working on that. It is true that an activity like gaming brings a lot of people and traffic to an area that otherwise wouldn't come there. And as I referenced earlier, those are complications for the community that they're required to deal with. And so to the extent possible, we have long been proponents of the tribes working cooperatively with local law enforcement, cross-deputization agreements to help them work through those, and where appropriate to bring federal resources to those.
I'm out of time, but I do want you to know that I consider the lack of law enforcement resources in Indian country, especially for our gaming tribes, to be one of the most critical issues Indian country is confronting. We've got long-standing historic socioeconomic issues we need to address, but if people aren't safe, if people aren't protected, and so this has to be one of your top priorities in your, acting role. I think we don't want to waste any more time waiting for someone who's not acting. I think it's critically important that law enforcement be a top priority. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.